Hey everyone, it's Sonia back with another update about the Canadian Postal Service strike. So they're now in their fourth week of striking. Unfortunately, it's still not looking good. They did resume negotiations last week, and I kind of had my hopes up. I heard that the union was supposed to give an answer by Friday, which I figured was Friday that's coming next week. So I was thinking, oh, maybe it's going to be the last week of the strike. And then turned out that things didn't go well at all. The Union of Postal Workers said that they were extremely disappointed in Canada Post's latest offer. They even described Canada Post's latest offer as moving in the opposite direction. Canada Post's response was that they had made attempts to close the gaps and they were surprised at the union workers' response. The union said that Canada Post's latest response had been something equivalent to, you should be happy that you even have a job. So you'd think that after over 3 weeks, there'd be some progress. But from what I'm reading in the news, the progress has been very limited. Okay, I gotta address something because in my last video, people had been leaving comments saying that this is not a crisis. I mean, they didn't go so far as to call me a crybaby, but they kind of made it out like I was exaggerating and this wasn't really such a big deal. And you know what? A lot of people feel that way. And I am going to come back to that because the government has actually been doing polls. And as I told you in the other video, the polls are very telling regarding what the government's intentions are. I'm going to come back to the polls, but I would sum it up this way. Most people haven't been that affected, but for those who have, it is a crisis. That's like saying, well, it didn't bother me that the fire department was on strike because my house wasn't on fire, so it didn't affect me. But for the person whose house was on fire, it did affect them. Here's one example. Remember when I told you earlier that we were told that Social Security checks would still be delivered, so don't worry, you're still going to get your money, you're going to be able to pay your rent and your bills. Well, apparently that's not going very well. The BC Ombudsman was called in to investigate thousands of checks not being delivered. So even though they said that they were going to deliver them, a lot of people didn't get them, which means that they don't have any money. So I guess for those people, it is a crisis. Apparently, there's also a bit of a panic happening in Calgary because due to the stoppage of Canada Post, there's a backlog. And now Purolator and UPS are refusing packages. I know you're going to tell me, oh, there are tons and tons of carriers, but they're also struggling because they're just suddenly overloaded. And if they do take your mail, there's a good chance it's going to be delayed. And as I mentioned in a previous video, Canada Post is the only service, they have an exclusive contract to deliver to all the remote and rural areas, including the north. As for me, technically, yes, because I live in the city, I could just get on eBay or some other platform and try to sell through there. Although I probably wouldn't make as many sales because I have a good presence on Poshmark, I have a customer base and all that, but I could move to another platform. The problem is, I just really couldn't handle the learning curve. Sure, I'll get it done at some point, but maybe it's also because I'm autistic. It takes me longer to adjust to new things. Maybe you're not autistic, so it's easier for you. But for me, I really have difficulty with like learning new things and switching, doing things differently. And it was making my brain grind so much that I couldn't, I just couldn't push through it. I had to let it go for now. If you are not autistic, you don't have any kind of other disability or learning disability, and it's easy for you to learn new things and to adapt to new technology, well, consider yourself lucky and by all means make the switch and keep your business running. But not everyone has such an easy time with that. That reminds me of another group of Canadians who are very severely affected by the postal strike, which is seniors. A lot of seniors have had difficulty adapting to new technology, not just like in terms of sending out packages, but in terms of receiving their checks, like I mentioned, and also receiving their bills. And some of them in remote areas don't even have internet. So they can't even do all these things online. And besides that, a lot of much older people haven't really adapted to the kind of technology of the world that we live in today. And they're still doing things the old way. And up until now, that was fine. Except now there's no more Canada Post. And a subgroup of seniors that are affected are people with Alzheimer's. People who are beginning to get Alzheimer's or dementia or senility or whatever, they're going to have a really hard time adapting to any of this kind of stuff. And actually, the Alzheimer's Society had put out statements because they know that there are people that this is the way they do things, and they're actually not even able to learn a new way of doing it because they have a disease now and maybe in the beginning stages, but it's affecting their ability to learn. So it's a small group, but for them it is a crisis. So there have been calls from the Chamber of Commerce and other groups for the federal government to step in and end the strike, which some people say, oh, well, that's totally unfair because then it means that the unions can have no power if they can't strike and the corporations can just do whatever they want. Again, it's not that the workers and their rights don't matter, but it's been a really, really long time. And normally when they have strikes, they do rotating strikes. I think the last time they had a real walkout full strike was like in the 1970s or 80s. And they were probably ordered back to work that time. This is basically an unprecedented situation, and yet the government is refusing to step in. I don't really understand exactly why, because they could if they wanted to. And they have already twice this year with other things, but for some reason this time they don't want to do it. Well, they're refusing to step in. They're making that clear. However, they are doing a whole lot of surveys, which means they're spending money on designing and implementing surveys. And like I said in the other video, that is what they do when they want to know what you're thinking, not because they want to do what you want, but because they want to gear the, well, propaganda, I guess you could say, the media coverage so that it pushes you in the direction of how they do want you to think. So the recent surveys, what they uncovered was that most people are not very affected by the strike. Under 25% said they were severely affected. Most people were a little affected, not affected at all, or somewhat affected, something like that. This would tell me that the government knows that the majority of people won't really be up in arms about this if they let it continue. And I'm getting the feeling that they do want it to continue. Why? Again, I don't know. Are they so much on Canada Post's side that they want them to go completely broke? I really don't understand what's in it for the government to stand back like this. But it seems to me that that's what they want to do, and they want you to be okay with that. And I noticed that in the media, they had been referring to the strike as a consumer inconvenience. Interesting. Just an inconvenience, not a crisis. Like, oh, we're just such a consumer society. Stop complaining. You're just being selfish. But meanwhile, the people in the northern and rural communities are saying that they're relying on Canada Post to bring stuff in, and they feel like they've been cut off from the outside world and they're starting to really suffer. But I think that for the government, as long as the people who are really suffering are a minority, even if the minority is a lot more people than the Canada Post workers, because that minority doesn't have enough to affect them politically. It wouldn't make enough of a difference as far as voting goes, I guess. So because of that, they probably don't really care. So for me, obviously it's affecting me very much. And I ended up deciding that it probably wasn't a good time to get on eBay because of the trouble people were having with other carriers. I don't want to get on there because I know nothing about this, right? Nothing. Like I know things about other things, but I don't know much about eBay. I thought, well, if I put my listings up and then it turns out that I can't ship them, that's going to be a really bad start to my eBay career. So I figured I would just wait until I had that sorted out. But for me, the reselling, it's not just like, oh, here's some mad money. It's just a side hustle so that I can go on vacation or something like that. The reason it's very important to me is that my autistic son is turning 18. They're going to cut off the child support for him. So that's less revenue for me. So I needed to come up with something to replace the child support. So my other job as a caregiver, I've always known that because the government tends to do cutbacks, that income is not stable. At any time, they could decide that they want to cut my hours in half or even cut them to a quarter. That could have happened at any time. They've done it before. They've cut them before. But it could happen again and again. So I've always had to have multiple streams of income because I don't get paid much with that, and they could cut it. And the other thing is that, God forbid that Aaron actually passes away, then I have absolutely no job. And yes, I could probably get another one, but you don't just get a job overnight when you're 53 years old in this economy. It's not always easy to just go and grab another job, right? So I've always needed to have like several side hustles going to make sure that I'm not going to be in a situation where if I lose my job or I lose something that I'm completely screwed, you know? So for me, I had worked very, very hard on Poshmark and I had really built that up. And it's very disappointing to see the risk that actually this postal strike might cause Poshmark Canada to close operations completely. I kind of think that that's what's going to happen. And that's why I feel so pressured to figure out all this other stuff very quickly. And then I had to accept that like I literally can't handle it. And that's probably where my disability factors in. And sometimes that's just how life is. And it's true that I do have a disability, but I'm also very persistent and I do have a strong character, I've been told before. So I will find a way to get through this and I will keep you updated and I hope you're all doing well. And thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.